Hello and welcome to Business Standard Views of the Week. What explains the slowdown in India's economy in recent years? How can the boom in exports be used to create jobs? Should you invest in India's startup story? Subscribe to Business Standard and read this week's top opinion pieces to find out. We start off with an incisive piece on the health of the economy and where it could be headed. India's economic growth has been down to a crawl in recent years. What explains the slowdown? Critics lay the blame on major policy lapses on the part of the Narendra Modi government, from demonetization to the goods and services tax, to the absence of major economic reforms in the first term. Arguing that the contention does not hold water, T.T. Ram Mohan highlights what he sees as the real reason behind why India's growth has slowed. His latest column also delves into crucial data to answer whether an acceleration in the growth rate is likely or not. Getting back to the high growth years is certainly a national challenge. However, there is also a larger and interconnected challenge that India and the world at large have to face. Our next piece delves into the matter. After a drop in 2020 due to the Great Lockdown, global greenhouse gas emissions will grow this year and again in 2022. It gets worse. According to the International Energy Agency, 2023 is projected to be the year with the greatest levels of carbon dioxide output in human history. Meanwhile, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change's report has spelled out that irreversible changes in climate are being witnessed across the globe. In these challenging times, central banks have a key role to play. In his latest column, Urjit Patel highlights what that role is and how monetary policy has to adjust. He also lists out the 5 dimensions that central banks must take into account as we combat climate change. Most of the news on the climate change front has been grim, and hopefully the world will come together to combat this menace. Meanwhile, there is some good news on the economic front even amid the pandemic. Our next piece talks about the opportunities this presents us with. India's exports of merchandise goods are booming. On the other hand, unemployment remains a pressing concern, especially amid the pandemic. Against this backdrop, A.K. Bhattacharya's latest column brings together 3 key takeaways from the exports data that policymakers can't ignore. It also identifies the employment-intensive sectors that are benefiting from the surge and which merit policy intervention if we want to create jobs, particularly in urban India. Last but not least, it closes with some crucial advice for policymakers. Time alone will tell whether the boom in exports is sustained or not. Meanwhile, another boom is clearly evident in the economy. The Indian startup scene is incredibly vibrant. Every week we hear of another unicorn being created, and the excitement in this space is only set to grow. Following Zomato's listing on stock exchanges, at least 35 to 50 startups will attempt to list in the coming 18 months. This poses a dilemma for public market investors. Should they attempt to participate in these new listings or stay away? With that in mind, Akash Prakash's latest column paints a clear picture of the rationale, risks, and opportunities attached to these two distinct approaches. It also helps investors planning to participate in these listings to navigate their way. Whether you ultimately choose to invest in them or not, it's undeniable that the world is bullish about Indian startups. However, there is one sector of the country's economy which is not working very well for some of the world's largest companies. If you leave out Hyundai, the top 4 global car makers command barely 6% share of the Indian passenger vehicle market. Among them, General Motors left India 4 years ago, and now Ford has decided to stop making vehicles in the country. In his latest column, T.N. Menon reveals why India is becoming a graveyard for the world's auto majors. He also explains why Maruti and Hyundai succeeded where the rest failed. Even if it is all academic now, he highlights the one segment where the global majors could have competed. Clearly, India's automobile sector is a challenging space. Moving on, the impasse between the government and the section of farmers protesting against the 3 recently enacted farm laws continues without an end in sight. Against this backdrop, Business Standard decodes the important messages sent out of the massive Mahapanchayat recently organized by the agitating farmers in Uttar Pradesh. It also advises the government to heed these messages so that it can recast its strategy on contentious farm issues. Hopefully, the government will reach out to the agitating farmers and some settlement will be arrived at. Leaving that behind, we bring this episode of BS Views to a close with a piece on a crucial sector that touches our lives and health. Over the course of the pandemic, insurance companies in India have done reasonably well. Yet, in spite of the hopes of further growth, there is little doubt that the insurance sector continues to underperform. Business Standard explains what's ailing the sector and reveals how the insurers, the regulator, and the government have all contributed to the situation. The editorial also prescribes the actions that could serve as necessary medicine.
If you like this video, share it and subscribe to Business Standard. For more news, views and insights, log on to www.business-standard.com. Do also follow us on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Telegram and LinkedIn.